All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the University of the District of Columbia, the pride of UDC, pride of DC. Yes. I'm Allyn Johnson, the Jazz Studies Director here. We thank you for coming, and I'm honored to have one of the, pillars of DC jazz community and education here with us, and it's a great honor to have Mr. Davey Yarborough. Yes, you can give it up. Most of my guests, I call them by their first name, but I dare not call Mr. Yarborough by his first name. My mother trained me, better than that. So I'm honored to have him. And before we get into some conversation, we're gonna play something. Okay. All right. Mr. Davey Yarborough. Yeah.
Alan asked me, what do you want to play first? And you never know. But immediately I thought about here and my transition through my matriculation through Federal City College and UDC. And there's a gentleman that was in my class, a bass player. If I say his name is Tex, a lot of us know who that is, but it's James King. And James King and Nasser Abaday and Aaron Graves and I were a quartet. When I decided to produce my first CD, I wanted to give tribute to many angels that I've had helping me get to where I am. So I found Steve Novosel, Keita Betts, Harold Mann, Donald Waters, Augustus Sims, and of course my other half, Esther. And we put this project together called Beautiful Friendship. And I called James and said, James, I'd like to play something that you composed. And this is one of the numbers from that CD. It's called One.
You can put it over here.
I don't want to be rattling on you. My head on you. Okay, who did that? Stupid.
Is that one of our good stands?
If it stays like it is, we're good.
Okay. I was going to say, if you need to, just beware. You need to bring that up.
This is just like crutch,
Little WD-40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of our good UDC stands. Okay. Good. All right.
Did I just hear somebody? Yeah, I thought I heard that. Mr. Fagan, from elementary school.
Wow. Once again, it's an honor to have Mr. Yarborough here. I'm just going to let him talk. Because I'm sure he has a lot of stories he can share with us, but I'll start you off.
That would be good because I'm all over the place.
Let's start from the beginning, or around the beginning. Just tell us about your beginnings as a musician and how that came to be in your early years, I guess.
Okay, now, it's a long story, but I'm going to start. I did start, I decided I wanted to be a musician in the 3rd grade. My dad got me a clarinet. It just so happened, you heard that voice say Yachty Bird. That was my nickname. Now everybody knows because it's the first time I ever heard it in public since I was a youngster. But I had one of my Boy Scout boyhood friends, Randy Thomas. I had a silver clarinet, and I thought it was gorgeous. So I went home and told my dad I wanted a clarinet, and he brings me a plastic one. hard rubber, but it was a real clarinet, and I took to it. And back in the day in DC public schools, there were band programs and orchestra programs in most of the schools, which was a great thing. But there would be one band director and 110 or 150 kids to try to teach, and they only came in elementary school one day a week. And I didn't have a private instructor, so I learned to imitate real fast. And that's what I would do. I would imitate whatever the people were doing in the band, and I'd go home and practice and put on records and play them and try to imitate what was going there. Then I could hear melodies pretty well. So the 3rd clarinet player, would they play something, I would play it back. And then by the next year, when the band played the same song again at Christmas time or Easter, because it was always the same repertoire, I could move up chairs. So that was the beginning.
Yeah, so I don't want to take this for granted, so are you from Washington, D.C.?
I'm a native Washingtonian. I was born
All right, there we go.
in Georgetown Hospital.
All right.
And how did I get to Ellington?
Yeah. So just a little more about your family. Are there any people in your family your immediate family that are musical? Or?
I had an uncle who was a guitar player and vocalist. He'd been through the Navy, and around that same time, as a matter of fact, I was actually 4 years old, and he came up from, my parents were from North Carolina, and my family was from North Carolina. He came up one time to see his sister, and he brought his guitar, and he played and sang and serenaded her. And that was the first time I had heard Body and Soul, by the way.
Wow.
And I figured out how to pink that out on the piano that was in the house. But that was, I just never forgot because of how it affected me in terms of, wow, that was gorgeous. So all of that was a part of me wanting to become a musician, hearing. My parents had all kinds of records. They had a brand new record player that I wasn't supposed to touch. And when they went to work and the babysitter wasn't watching, I'd go down in the basement and I'd turn on the Combination. Anybody remember that? The Combination. We had old grunge. And my parents would always say, don't play the records, we go home, we'll play them when we get home. So, but I thought I figured out how to turn it on and turn it off. Because, you push the button and the light came on. Well, when you push the button to turn it off, the turntable didn't stop. The lights went off and the radio went off, but the turntable was still spinning. Whoa, did I get... Did you play the turntable? Did you play the record? No, well, why is the turntable going? 'Cause, 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 'cause,
The first time I met you, I want to share this because it's very important. Because the first time I met you, I was fresh out of high school, and my first year at GW, and I ran into a saxophone player named James Cheeks. And so he was going to GW as an engineering student. I was a pre-med student in biology. And so, we kicked it up, music, man, you play the saxophone, blah, 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 yeah. So he says, yeah, man, come with me up to my school. Cool, all right. So, Duke Ellington School of Arts. Oh, man, great. So I'm hanging out with James, we cool, and I walk into your classroom. Man, did that change my life. Because I had never, been around so many other students that were like so advanced at that age. And then I ran into Mr. Yarborough. He was so, he just like brought me on in, What you play, man? Well, I'm trying to play the piano. Cool, play something for me. But whoa. And just meeting you there, and the effect you had on the students, I was impressed. And I was thinking, what is it about, you have a special gift for teaching and attracting the young people to music. Is that a gift? I need to learn that because, what is that?
Actually, it's the result of the many, and I mean many, angels that I have had directed me through my path of my Creator's order steps. Because I had no desire in high school, jump into high school. I was in the orchestra, I was in the band, and still not working with the eyes because I wasn't getting trained on sight reading. And to hide my lack of knowledge or lack of skills, I acted up. And I'm not ashamed of it. I was just trying to survive. But my high school band director, who was still with us, Jesse Adams, pulled me over one day and said, sit down. So I sat down on his stool. He said, one of these days, you're going to be sitting in my seat having to deal with people just like you. I decided at that point I would not teach under any circumstances. Fast forward, senior year, just around the time when the colleges come out to recruit. Bobby Felder, Robert N. Felder, Dr. Bobby Felder brought his entertainment package over to Coolidge High School. And that was my first introduction to seeing a live big band. And I was blown away. And afterwards, I went up and spoke with him. And he says, you're interested in majoring in music? And I was, but I didn't have, I come from a family of 6 kids. And my father had already told me, he said, look, your brother and your sister in college, if you don't get a scholarship, you might not go. So I got a partial scholarship to Maryland University in journalism. But when he asked me that, I was saying, well, maybe, and my parents weren't really big on me being a music major, by the way. That's another story. Yes, keep that in your hip pocket. That's something you fall back on, story. So, Dr. Felder said, would you be interested in a full scholarship to Federal City College? Full scholarship. Bing. Ran home. Yes, ran home to Dad. No, you don't spend any money on. I can go to school. I got a full scholarship in music. Real quiet. But, that full scholarship worked. And that's basically how I got here. And the teaching thing came while I was here. And I really wanted to make sure that I got a chance to talk to that because in that school, Federal City and UDC were the same. Federal City just came first. But the staff that was here in the music department was fabulous. Not just that they were monster musicians, Doctor. I don't even want to start listing names because there was so many of the faculty. They were all consummate musicians. but they also were angels. There was nothing that I asked for that they did not provide. Right down, I mean, I ended up getting paid to go to school because they put me with work study because they knew my situation. They found all kinds of work for me. And I got my scholarships, and of course I had to do my part. I did stay on the dean's list, so.
Right.
But even when I graduated from here, I was already, Dr. Arthur Dawkins was my teacher here, but he was also a mentor here. He was also at Howard University. So when I got my, and I'm gonna skip that, the associate's degree, because that was all a part of not wanting to teach. It was Bobby Felder who pulled me aside and said, what are you gonna do with an associate's degree that you can't do with a high school diploma? And because I was ready, I was gone. Mom and Dad, I went to college, I'm out on the road. And I had to stop, and I couldn't answer the question. So he said, look, you're halfway there, you get your bachelor's degree, and you'll be eligible for, better paying jobs, and so all of the right things that he said. And so I had my head shaking yes, and then I said, okay, well, I was majoring in performance, so I was thinking, well, so you have a bachelor's degree in performance? They said, no. We have it in education. Education. You mean like I got to be a teacher? And they said, you don't have to be a teacher, but the degree is for education. And I really didn't want to do that. But then Dr. Dawkins said, well, look, man, you don't have to teach. You just you can get your bachelor's in basket weaving, but just you're halfway there in music, go ahead and get it. And the next year I had to do my first practicum at Jefferson Junior High School under Winston Hall, piano player. And the experience of working with the young people and seeing the light in their eyes and the excitement that they had in learning, just like I wanted to, I was hooked. And I've been hooked ever since.
Wow. That's a wonderful story. I'm going to take a pause and we're going to play some more. We'll play now. But before we do, I just want to give more honor to you because I was thinking while you were telling that story, the reason why me meeting you was very important because I had a teacher that told me I would never make it into Duke Ellington. Because I guess at the time, my reading chops wasn't happening and I was playing everything by ear and I was up to church, She was like, oh, you'll never make it into Duke Ellington. Okay. And then so I met you and then my whole path just, from meeting you and then it's onward to meeting Jones, but we'll talk about that. So let's play something.
Okay. You want to do I have in being here, I had the honor of meeting the great Sonny Stitt, and his wife, Pam, was a DC public school teacher, and I met her in the hall and asked her if I said, do you think I could study with Mr. Stitt? And she said, well, here's his number, call him. And I called him in New York, and I had applied for a grant through the National Endowment for the Arts. For you students in here, the Foundation Center, which is now called Candid, it's a wonderful thing. They house all the grants and scholarships that you can think of. Go for it. That's my pitch for that, because that's what got me through. But I had a $5,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and I wanted to study with Mr. Stitt. And I told him, if you write a letter to the National Endowment, they'll fund the lessons. And he wrote the letter. And another angel, and that's a long story, but that's how I got to that point. But when he passed, Gus Sims, who was on our Beautiful Friendship album, I was a pallbearer with them. And he and Keeter in the limousine said, you should write a piece in his honor. And I did, and I was working on my master's, just finishing up my master's, and when I finished it, Fred Irby at Howard University recorded it. And I really haven't had a chance to play it a lot since I have recorded it, but I don't get a chance to play it. And I said, this This whole thing for me, again, is a tribute to my angels, who I hope I am contributing to their immortality. It's called Song for Sunny Stick.
We'll stay. That's because it's your school. Right where you from. for this recording. This is the first time he and I have ever got a chance to play.
This is so much fun.
Yes, it is.
Could you talk more about your relationship with Sonny Stitt? The big sigh.
The guys knew, Keita Betts and all of my heroes, and they all knew him. Gus had played and recorded with him, and Keita had played with him. And again, these were my mentors. These guys were guiding me along with, and those mentors, by the way, I met while I was here. But first, just the fact that he said yes without even hesitating. Then he said, well, look, I'm traveling, I'm on the road, but I'm going to be moving to D.C. And what I'll do when I know I'm going to be home, you can come by my house and I'll give you a lesson. We always had a lesson at 1:15 whenever you came in. Usually it was a Saturday that I, get a chance to get to a lesson, but whenever it was. And my first lesson, I went in there, so I'm getting this ready. I'm going to play saxophone for Sonny Stitt. So he said, okay, play something. And I commenced to playing Red Top, the jazz blues. And I got about through maybe the first, second verse, and he said, stop. I'm thinking to myself, I didn't play any, I don't think I played any wrong notes. He said, yes, you did. He said, the first thing that I want you to learn from day one, the first thing I want you to, and the last thing I want you to remember from our meeting is when you get ready to play somebody else's song, you pay respect to their melody. Wow. You quote their melody. You can do anything you want to do after that, but you pay respect to the composer by playing their melody, because I had embellished it. So that was the first lesson, number one. Lesson number two, he said, okay, play this scale, play that, and, play these chords. And while I was playing for him, he was sitting with a notebook and a pen, and he's writing. And when I finished that, he handed it to me, stood up and played it. And it was in ink and there were no mistakes. And of course, I listened to his music, and one of the things that brought me to him was I never heard him make mistakes while he was playing. And sidebar, one day when he went upstairs to get the ice cream that we would always have after our lesson, there were, in his basement, there were like records stacked up to here, all in this area, all of them stacked up. I mean, a bunch of records. So while he was up, I said, I'm gonna go over here and see what he listens to. So I lifted it up, Sonny Stitt. Lifted up, Sonny Stitt. Sonny Stitt. And these were all different records. And I went over to the next part, Sonny Stitt, Sonny Stitt, Sonny Stitt, Sonny Stitt, Sonny Stitt. And I said, wow. And I later found out that he was one of the most recorded saxophone players in the world. And so he came back downstairs and I said, these are all your records. He said, I know. And we went on with the lesson, but when I got ready to leave that day, he had done the record with Frank Rossellino, I Remember Bird. If you don't have that record, you should have that record because it's a wonderful piece. But he picked it up and he signed it and handed it to me. Blew me away. So I got more, but.
Yeah, there's this legend that Sonny Stitt used to go around looking for the best tenor player, saxophone, tenor player, alto player, probably Barry too, but in yeah, in every town. And when he came here, he would be looking for Buck Hill.
He and a lot of other people.
He said he and a lot of other people.
Jimmy Heath.
Oh, really?
Jimmy Heath, and I know because he asked me. He said, Buck, what? Buck's still around? Where Buck? said, and what he said was, he would do that because Buck was the only one that gave him any trouble when he came in terms of playing.
Ooh, yeah, I can hear that. Yeah, said he used to call him the lone wolf. You know, who are some of the other people, I guess, in the DC community that you sort of, I guess, mentors? I have some names here. Maybe I should name some names.
Yeah, because I got a lot.
Okay, so I'll do it like this. Okay. I have Sir Roland Hannah. Could you speak on Sir Roland Hannah?
Sir Roland Hannah, I was introduced to him when I was with Keita Betts Quartet. And we played, I can't remember the first place we played, but after that performance, he was going to do a live recording down at the Dumbarton School. And he said, would you come along and play? We're going to do the music of Ellington. And would you like to play on this recording? And I asked, my wife asked as well, to sing. And we went down and we did the recording and some other things after that. And that recording, by the way, never came out, but that's because it just didn't. That was way back in the ADAC machines and all that kind of stuff. There was some problems. But after that, he would, whenever he would come down, I'd get a call. And Mount Pelier Cultural Arts Program project, we're having a tribute to Duke Ellington for his centennial. And they invited Sir Roland Hannah to come in and do a lecture and a concert. And he called me and said, would you come and do this, with me? And because I was working at Duke Ellington at the time as well, so he knew that I was familiar with the Duke's music. And it became the first recording ever produced at Mount Pelier. It was called Royal Essence. Now, the kicker, because these things kept happening to me, so we had the rehearsal the day before. And he says, look, I was always told that whenever you get a chance to record, you should compose something. So I'm going to compose a piece, and you're going to compose a piece, and we're going to do it tomorrow. Oh. And we did. We got there, we did a little sound check after his lecture, and we played, and it ended up being the piece that I wrote. Was called Royal Essence, and it became the title of the CD. And I say that, but I say that because this is what the angels would do to you. They would make sure that you got every opportunity possible. And he would come back, whenever he would come back, every year he'd call and just do Mount Pelier again. And one year I hadn't heard from him, and I knew he was going to come up, and I called his wife, Ramona, and said, I hadn't talked to Sir Roland in a while. And she says, he had just passed away. He had just come back from Japan. And she said, well, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. And but all these guys, Sonny Stitt was like a grandfather. So he'd give me ice cream. He liked Western wear. I had several Stetson hats that he gave me. And there's so many, that's why there's so many. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again.
Well, I got a couple of names.
Yeah.
How about Mr. Hilton Felton?
Oh, yeah. And my wife Esther called him my girlfriend. So I am at the Mayflower Hotel. I told you she had some stories. And I used to go stop in because he was playing there a solo piano. And I sat back in the back in the dark, and I mesmerized by his playing. And I did this for a while. I never went up to meet him. And then one day I got up with courage and I walked up and I introduced myself. He said, I know, I saw you back there the first time you came in. I don't know why you didn't come up before. And the next thing you know, I get a phone call. And he says, look, I'm playing matter of fact, it was with Keita. And I said, Keita said he wanted a saxophone, so can you just, so that was my first performance with Keita, and that's how I got to, meet him. I did to play with him, but I met him at Wolf Trap, and that's another story. While I was here at Federal City College, the great guitar Bill Harris came into the workshop, and it was Federal City, so that was on G Street, 9th and G. And he came to do a lecture and a concert with the big band, and I was in the big band. And that was my very first concert with the big band. And I have Bill Harris, who I knew who guitar Bill Harris was. And I'm playing solos in the big band with him. Dr. Corey, you gotta tell him that I was, you think I'm little now? The legs were even a little smaller. And I had on my suit and my slacks and whatever. And while I was playing, my legs were shaking so much, I thought I was going to fall. And I don't want to mess up my relationship with the school or with getting a chance to work with Bill Harris. Afterwards, I said, could anybody see my legs shaking like they were? And they couldn't. I guess my pants were too big. You really couldn't see. And I'll abbreviate because this just keeps on going. But working from that point, Keita Betts, I actually worked in Keita's quartet for the next 5 years. And Bill Harris took me to Wolf Trap and introduced me to Sarah Vaughan, Keita Betts, Billy Eckstein, and John Malachite was playing with Sarah at the time. Okay, but he took me backstage, and that's how I ended up doing the same thing with the students that I had. Billy Taylor used to always talk about it. I said, every time I come to D.C., here comes Davey Yarborough with 10, 12 kids in tow, to hear. But because of my experiences, and again, the angels that took me under their wing, and would never ask for anything. All they ever said to me was, pass it on.
Okay, I'll name one more name.
Okay.
How about Andrew White?
Yes. Well, Andrew White came to Howard University, as a matter of fact, with the Airman a note. And he did a concert, and he did his Coltrane suite. And if there's anyone in here who doesn't know who Andrew White III was, he was the world's authority on the music of John Coltrane, and I can't. He transcribed Train, Dolphy, Eubie Blake, and when he transcribed, you got exactly what was on the record. And he was, I think, when he passed, he had over 3,500 publications, and most of them were either treatises on jazz or transcriptions. Or he had a book called, what was the name of that book? Rustic.
X-rated.
No, he had the X-rated. He had a whole bunch of X-rated stories.
Something about the sugar.
Oh yeah. Here comes the sugar.
Everybody loves the sugar.
Everybody knows the sugar.
I'm on that record actually.
800 pages.
Yeah.
Everybody loves the sugar.
But when I met him, I called again. I picked up the phone and said, Mr. White, I know your work, and I would like to have a lesson if you would. And he says, I don't give lessons. He says, I give consultations. So basically what he was saying, don't take your horn out the case. But when you talk to him, you learn so much about, he talked to business. He was the one, between he and Hilton Felton, they were the ones that taught me about promoting yourself, publishing your music. Hilton, actually, the very first recording that I put together was at Hilton Felton's ask. He said, look, we're going to go into the recording studio next week. He said, so what we're going to do, you write 10 songs down, and I'll write 10 songs down, and you compose something, and, you know, I'll compose something, and we'll rehearse. That was Sunday. And on Monday, he had already booked the recording session. And we went in, one take, and that's how he rolled. He said, if it doesn't work, toss it out. I saw one take, and a week after the cassettes, back then it was cassettes, it was before CDs. Am I that old? Yes. I had a trip to San Remo with the great Sedatress Brown, or Boxley, who was the organ player, vocalist, and San Remo. And she did that same thing when we were rehearsing at Faces for those from DC. We were playing at Faces, and she said, okay, we'll come in tomorrow, we rehearse, and then we go to San Remo. And she said, okay, we're gonna write something, compose something today, and we're gonna play it when we get there. She wrote San Remo Blues, I wrote It's Time for Love. And so at that point, I decided I was gonna listen to my creator, and yeah, he said I'm supposed to write, so that's how I started composing.
Okay, let's take another station break. Do you want to play something else, or I wrote a song for you?
You know, I want to hear this because I've seen it, and just the thought that somebody would take that much effort, and I'm still here because all of the songs for people were for folks who weren't here anymore. So he invited me to play on it, but I can't do that. I have to hear this. I have to sit and absorb this because that term, giving you your flowers before you're gone, this is what Calvin Jones and Federal City College and UDC and our angels in Washington, D.C. have created. So,
Okay. The first title of the song was Song for Davey Yarborough. The second title was Reach, as in reaching out to the younger generation. The third title I came up with today is Father of Many Imaginations. I was thinking about Abraham, and his name means Father of Many Nations. I thought I was clever. Father of Many Imaginations. I'll take up offering after that.
The future is in great hands. Great hands. Great hands.
Don't know what else to ask you. You've, I read your bio, of course. Yes. Talk about your time at Duke Ellington, some, and then Washington Institute.
Okay. Those are two long stories. As a matter of fact, it's going to be the second time.
Too long?
That'll be the second book.
Okay.
But again, here are the angels working. Superintendent Floretta McKenzie, who was responsible for getting instrumental music programs back into secondary schools after Vincent Reed had actually relaxed that law, had started following my performances. And I taught her daughter, by the way, when I first got out of school, I taught driver's ed at Wilson High School. And which is where I met her and her daughter Donna. But she had been following me, and I went ahead and applied for another job in DCPS, and I ended up becoming a counselor while I was actually privileged to teach here, teach saxophone here, and I was a counselor. I ended up becoming a counselor at School Without Walls and at Duke Ellington, which is where I did my student teaching, by the way. I was the first instrumental music person to student teach at Duke Ellington School of the Arts under Wallace Mann, as a matter of fact, and Mickey Bass used to come, and the jazz studies program was after school, and it was Dr. McKenzie who came in tow the principal from McKinley High, because they had lost their music major program. It had their school had basically closed, and she wanted to start it back up. So she brought the principal from McKinley up to Ellington, where I was counseling, and she says, I want you to go back in the classroom as a music teacher. What are you doing up here counseling? So I have created a position at McKinley High School where you would restart the music majors program at McKinley, and the principal at Ellington was standing right here, and McKenzie was standing right here, and I'm looking at, okay, we got two bosses, one who can really hurt me, and they saw the fear in my eyes, and Dr. McKenzie said, look, I don't care where you go, but I would like for you to go back into band directing. So I had been at Ellington as a counselor, and I knew the students, and I enjoyed working there. And she said, but I want to start a jazz studies program. And she said, fine. And Mr. Eldridge, Maurice Eldridge, the principal at Ellington, said, but I don't have any more slots for teachers. She says, you do now. And from that point, the curriculum, the daily curriculum at Ellington had a jazz studies program. And that's a long story, so I'm not going to go any further than that. From there, though, while I was counseling, there was a young man who was a visual arts student. He was very, 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 very quiet. But one day he just showed up at my door, and he was just standing there. So we struck up a conversation, and then after a while, that became a daily thing. He ended up being valedictorian of his class, and by that time I'd moved into the band program, and that year, after he became valedictorian, he went to the New York School of the Arts, and after his first semester, he came home for the summer, and during that summer, he was brutally murdered in Rock Creek Park, and it was all a part of the drug culture, but it was my first experience with drug trafficking. As a counselor, I was a trainer of trainers of substance abuse awareness. So I touted myself as make sure you don't deal with this. But I had never dealt with the trafficking end, and he had gotten into that, and and he was retaliated upon on that. Well, the next year, there's a drummer that I had in the big band was killed in Southeast. He was shot and killed. And I just decided that, the summer, I wanted to know what my students were doing during the summer. I wanted to be a part of there. So I started teaching at Ellington during the summers and just said, y'all just come back and we'll just have band class, And they did. And I'm at People's Congregation United Church of Christ, and our pastor there got word that that's what I was doing. And he said, well, I can give you your own space. And he cleaned out the clothes closet and carpeted it. And that's where I started working with them. And then in 1998, we founded the Washington Jazz Arts Institute at People's. And we are celebrating in September 17th will be our actual 25th anniversary.
Speaking of Duke Ellington, we have a few students here that are former students, graduates. Could you raise your hand or stand or? Yeah. UDC students, excellent students here. See, Mr. Yarborough sent Inama, and did you send Ronald? Yeah. Mr. Walton and yeah, see everybody. So we thank you for sending. We're going to maybe take questions from the audience. Not unless you want to play one more song or no. Okay.
She stood up, and I want you all to really, everybody turn around and look at probably my theory savior.
All of our theory savior, if you're talking about the person on the
Dr. Judith Corey.
Yeah.
I have to elaborate on it just a little bit. Theory was hard for the guy who didn't get to study theory in junior high school and high school. And I would be here all day, and then I would leave to go do my gig, and then I would come back the next morning, and the school would shut down, and I'd still be working, and Dr. Corey saw that I was still I hanging around, but when they closed up the school, I didn't have access to a piano. So she actually gave me the key to her office and let me study until I was done, until I had to do my gig. I will never forget that. And I love you so much for it.
Okay, we have a question in the audience. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I just want to say that I was with a big band touring, and we went to 3 cities in Europe, including the Montreux Jazz Festival. I just told Davey this in February, but we had just arrived, and I see this bus pull up with all these kids are streaming off the bus. And I said, this has got to be Ellington, and it was Ellington. So Davey didn't he taught them the world. And no, I didn't see any other any other buses full of kids. That was great. So anyway, my question has to do with I remember I was at the benefit for you for the program when Keeter, you had the bass summit. Remember that?
Yeah.
I think there were 7 bass players. I just remember Keeter and Steve, and I can't remember who else. Anyways, Keeter endowed your jazz program for perpetuity. So I just thought that was so amazing. So I just wondered, how long does that last for eternity?
Actually, his family put together a scholarship at Ellington, and they were trying to get it to grow to be able to endow the jazz studies chair. It never did when Keeter passed, and for whatever reason, we ended up, because we did accumulate some funds, and that became a scholarship in his name until he passed. And that scholarship went away, but when I left Ellington, they created an award in my name, Duke Ellington School of the Arts Jazz Excellence Award. And it now is accumulating scholarship money for graduating students from Duke Ellington.
Yes, sir.
Davey, tell us about your experience with the youth orchestra.
Oh, I was going to do that at first because even before the youth orchestra, Mr. Fagan, Roy Fagan, is one of my childhood buddies from elementary school. But when we were in junior high school, he wanted to play clarinet as well, so he got a clarinet, and we used to sit in his basement and fiddle around as much as we could, again teaching ourselves. But that was the year, and I was in junior high school, and I did mention that we went to Rabault Junior High School, where Roberta Flack was music teacher. She was actually a homeroom teacher. But Roy said, you know what? You go on ahead and play. This was fun for a little while, but this is going to be work. But he's a fantastic athlete. He was a Olympic hopeful when we were growing up, and he still lives in the same house. And it has been, and like I said, it's one of those lifelong relationships. Again, what happens in DC? You know, we are a huge, great, and compassionate family.
You mentioned Today's Ground. Tell us about War's Love and Peace.
Ooh, what's Love and Peace? Okay, now you can see. I tell you that I must be old because this is a whole bunch of long stories. So, and when I graduated, I got to start with this because it wasn't supposed to happen. At least that's what the school thought. So in my senior year, I'm getting ready to do my senior recital, and as far as anybody concerned, in the faculty, I was single and, you know, not attached to anyone. Well, and the thing about it was their fault. It was the school's fault because Dr. Arthur Dawkins played on her first recording, and she had a gig, New Year's Eve, 1976, 77, and he sent me to sub for him. And I knew who Esther Williams was, and because she is notorious. She was a Miss Black DC and a recording artist. So she knew Bobby Felder before I did. So that's the other story. So after my recital, because she came to my recital, and everybody's like, "Who's that?" This is my fiance. Huh? Your what? My fiance. And every time I took a step out of somebody else's office, because the first one was Dr. Dawkins. He took and grilled me. He said, "Why do you want to be married? You got your life in front of you." And he gave me this long lecture. And at the end of the lecture, he said, "Well, do you love her?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay." So he was good. He didn't say no. But every time I would step out of an office, another professor would step out of their office and say, "Come here." When you're talking about you can get married. And I went through that. I got grilled all the way through the entire, again, I'm telling you about this place. People don't really understand this institution. It is responsible for so many lives. After that, that performance, we got to know each other, we exchanged numbers, and we ended up at Moore's Love and Peace. And there's a lot. We played a couple more performances. I went to Moore's Love and Peace and played with her with Charlie Hampton and Daniel Esther Wade. And sometimes it was just that because Charlie played the B3. So I played there for about a year, and at that time we hadn't started dating or anything. She was calling me to play a performance, and I was playing with this pretty girl. You know, and I'm trying to keep my mind on playing the music so I can stay in the band. And Sedatress was playing out at a club in the Southeast called Manny's. And she was ready to leave that job. So she called me, said, I want you to take over my job. And it's your trio. I'm going to even leave you the drummer, Al Butterfield. We're going to leave the drummer and you just get your organ player and you keep on. So I went to do that, and I did it for about a year. And I ended up going back to Moore's, because when I left Moore's the first time, he said, well, we want to stay in touch, and that's when we started dating. So we dated on a motorcycle. After my job at Manny's, I would go by and pick her up at Moore's Love and Peace, and we would ride till the sun came up. And when they found out, they were happy though, but they didn't know we were dating either. See, this is our business, we thought. Once they found out, the owner of the club, Robert Moore, actually catered our wedding. But we were there for 11 years, and we started out doing 4 nights a week, and like I said, we were there for, and I even would come in sometimes on Sunday with Lincoln Ross, and we would do, a little duo there. But that was my bread and butter while I was in college as well.
Isn't that a wonderful story?
Yeah.
We have time for one more, maybe? One more question. Anybody have a question?
What was your Bill Cosby experience?
Oh,
It was a lot better than his situation right now. Okay. There was a piano player in town who played with, I guess he was most known working with Cleve Francis, who was a heart surgeon, who was also a country western singer who got $1 million contract with Capitol Records. But I did one of his performances, and he called me to do a couple of recording sessions, with him. And one day he called and said, look, I got this project that I'm going to do, and we're going to record, and then I'm going to send it away, and we'll find out what happens after that. So I go in and do the session, and a week later, matter of fact, that was like on a Monday, a week later on Thursday, he called and said, turn on the television at prime time. And I turned on the television, and there was the Cosby Show. And I became a member of the Cosby Show ensemble, which I did for the next 3-4 years.
again, thank you, Mr. Yarborough, for being here. Let's give a hand for Mr. Davey Yarborough.
I'm going to end by saying again, this institution saved my life and gave me life and nurtured me. And I am who I am today. Even though I got my master's at Howard, I was so well prepared here that Howard was a breeze.
Allyn, tell me about some of the upcoming programs that we have over the next couple of weeks.
Oh, yes. On April the 13th, you would think I would know these. April 13th, there's a master class here during the jazz history class on Charles Mingus. And Mr. Orrin Evans will be here present. He'll be talking about Charles Mingus music. And that evening on around 7 o'clock, April 13th, excuse me, 7:30. At least I would have been on time, right? We'll be performing a duo piano concert with Mr. Orrin Evans, and in the rhythm section will be Michael Bowie and Quincy Phillips. And we're going to have a good time. And April 24th is the Big Band Jazz, Calvin Jones Big Band Jazz Festival. We're back, featuring University of Maryland, Howard University, and of course, the Firebirds, UDC Jazz Ensemble. We have some recitals coming up. The 18th of April, Mr. Kevin Espinoza, he's a guitarist, will be giving a recital. On the 19th, our Jade Jacobs, our jazz vocal major, will be in recital, her senior recital. What else? Anybody else want to? Small ensemble concert. When is the small ensemble concert? April 11th? Yes, April 11th. Yeah, you better be there. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, they will tell you about this Friday.
This Friday, Mr. Yarborough.
This Friday, the Washington Jazz Arts Institute Intergenerational Ensemble will be featured on the Millennium Stage at the Kennedy Center at 6.
Wonderful, wonderful.
As a part of our celebrating our 25th anniversary, we also have a project that we've been working on for the last couple of years called In Their Own Words. As a matter of fact, Rusty Hassan has been our resident expert because it's a documentary, or mini documentary, on jazz artists and clubs and culture in Washington, D.C., I guess starting from the 60s, up to now. That will be featured on September 1st at the Reach at the Kennedy Center. And on the 9th of September, we will celebrate with our gala at the Washington Jazz Arts Institute Gala, and hopefully you will see a big band of our alumni as well as some other artists.
Wonderful, wonderful. Any other church announcements? All right. See, I knew it, church announcement.
I gotta brag, I'm getting
Yes,
a
sir.
Freddie Golson Award at Howard University.
Right. Yes. Mr. Rusty Hassan will be getting the award. Also, Mr. Calvin Jones will be getting the award, Benny Golson Award. And there's a band. Oh, Mark Curry, who is also went to UDC, had a great career with Betty Carter and Abby Lincoln and so forth, Roy Hargrove, so forth. He'll be getting an award. There's another band, a brass band, I forget the name. But yeah, Benny Golson Award. Oh, one more thing. Yours truly will be playing with the legendary Charles McPherson. If you know who Charles McPherson is, this is like he's 85 or something like that. Excellent saxophonist. He'll be playing the Blues Alley on the 27th, 28th of April, and I'm just honored to be playing with him. So, NEA Jazz Master. Oh.
The National Endowment for the Arts Jazz Masters awardees this year are Kenny Garrett, Regina Carter, Sue Mingus, and Roy Haynes. And that will take place. So Friday, the WJI will be playing in tribute to them, but the actual awards program is Saturday at the Kennedy Center in the Kennedy Center Concert Hall.
And then Kenny Garrett is giving a master class tomorrow at the Children's Hall at Howard University. That's at 11, or maybe, I think. Get there early.
Okay. So as you see, there's a lot going on in DC, in the DC jazz community. Thank you again for coming to UDC. God bless you. Good night and be safe.